Thank you for coming to this session, which is on how to develop cross-channel user journeys that can 4x your revenue. That is a bloody big claim, but hopefully you'll see kind of throughout some of the process and then using that process, what the end results can look like to generate that type of revenue. And we have a customer example for that. Who am I? I am a solutions consultant for Iterable. I'll explain who we are as a company in a second, but you might be wondering why am I the one speaking about cross-channel engagement if I'm not necessarily one of you a marketer. So a little bit about me. Started as a management consultant at Deloitte Digital, and so there I spent 6 years speaking to a lot of enterprise-sized customers, doing a lot of customer journey mapping. That's what all of those post-its are, but really trying to understand across different industry verticals and the different channels in which they're communicating with their customers. How should they engage with their customers, when they should do it, and how frequently? And always using those customer journey mapping techniques, some of which I'll expand upon shortly. This kind of diagram at the bottom, probably a lot of you have seen before. This is the Chief MarTech diagram, which screams at us how kind of convoluted from a MarTech vendor perspective our industry is. I think in 2022, there's over, I think it's 9,000 different types of vendors. The reason that I bring that up is because when I was a management consultant, it was very much vendor agnostic. But then the element of the job I really enjoyed was the discovery. So listening to marketers tell us what were their biggest pain points. Is it data silos? Is it not having access to their tech teams? Is it having to log into 3 different platforms in order to communicate with their customers on 3 different channels? So I really enjoyed that bit. And so then I made the jump to go vendor side at Iterable, where I am a solutions consultant, ultimately working in the pre-sales team, speaking with prospective customers, understanding what they're looking for in a customer engagement platform, which is what we are. So kind of a quick plug for Iterable. We are that customer engagement platform that will allow marketers to communicate across a range of different channels. Some of the ones at the bottom there, the way in which we very much kind of encourage our customers to do that communication is by using data from disparate sources, bring it into our platform, but then really use it to drive those personalized campaigns that will make your app, your website, your product sticky, but then also encouraging brand loyalty. So a bit of a plug as to the company I work for, but then also why I'm here talking to you about cross-channel campaigns. These are some of the different companies that we work with, and ultimately we help them deliver those their different campaigns across a range of different channels. For today's session though, it's not going to be me jumping into the platform and doing a demo as much as I'm tempted to do so. It's really kind of focused on the strategy from a marketer's perspective, how you can really drive an effective cross-channel campaign and use different data types, and then I'll bring that to life with a customer example as well, and then time permitting Q&A, but also if anything I says doesn't make sense or you want to jump in with a question, please feel free to do so. So cross-channel 101, I think it's always important to start with the what, so kind of a level setting on definition. I think cross-channel, it might be kind of table stakes for some people, but it's still important to make that clear definition as to it's not just being able to have different channels, but it's being able to effectively use those channels to align with your business goals and making sure that you're communicating with customers at the right time. So at Iterable, we think of it as call it a golden thread, and then essentially you're using that to weave through your different communications and your different channels to make sure that there is a cohesive communication that you're driving, and that's done across your different channels and at the right time. Why is this important? Again, being able to drive really effective cross-channel campaigns isn't just about being able to say, hey, we do mobile push, we do email, we do in-app, we do mobile inbox, we do direct mail for some of the people still doing that. It's being able to really turn that back and look at the effectiveness of having that cross-channel campaign. So here are a few stats that really attest to that. The first is that 89% retention rate for brands with strong cross-channel subscriber engagement. So usually that's reflective of the most mature marketing brands tend to have the most mature channels. 49% of consumers buy from their favorite cross-channel brands at least once per week from Marketing Land. And then 10% year-on-year growth for companies with the strongest cross-channel subscriber engagement. So hopefully here it just gives some numerical kind of backing to the thinking that having that effective cross-channel campaign can really help your business. So here we're going to talk about how cross-channel applies to your customer journey as part of a wider, cohesive lifecycle marketing strategy. But before jumping into that, thinking about customer journey mapping, post-it notes, Miro board, how many of you in this room have mapped out a customer journey in real life, if just by a show of hands, maybe? Okay. Yep, I see quite a few. How many haven't but are thinking about it? And maybe the reason that you're in this room? See a few hands. And then they were the only two options that I had. And I think most of you, to be honest, you had your hand up for the first one, which is interesting. And hopefully this then will be a reminder perhaps of some of the things you're already doing, or you'll see some new things that you weren't doing beforehand. But this is the cross-channel journey that we use in Iterable. And in this first stage, we're looking at it from the perspective of an end user. So I'm sure many of you have seen versions of this or your own iterations of this, but really there are 5 stages that end user goes through. That first is awareness. So a user learns about your brand and your offerings. They might not have made the jump or have fully engaged, but they're aware of who you are and perhaps what you do. Then consideration. So now a user is moving closer to that purchase or that transaction or that goal and starts to understand the value of your offering and how that fits into their lifestyle and life cycle. Then we have purchase as well. So now they've actually bought something, they've departed with their capital and put it with you, which for some is the end goal. But of course, from a marketer's perspective, you're thinking beyond that. You don't just want them to buy and then say buy. You want them to stay and you want to nurture them. And that's what that next step is. So being able to service and nurture them and use some of the information that you've now captured to really make them a loyal brand and really increase their affinity towards your brand. Sorry. And then re-engagement is that final stage. So the phase in which users come back for more, which is more or less every marketer's dream, because you've achieved in that goal of not only getting them to make that purchase, but now they're making repeat purchases and they become a really high value customer. So we take that customer journey map, and then these segments on the top are now looking at it from the perspective not of the end user, but as you as marketers and what you do in your day-to-day roles. And again, these will be terms that you use within your roles, but always worth kind of going over it again. So from an activation perspective, when you're running those activation campaigns, that's to send me an email and be like, hey, Philip, this is Brand X and this is what we do. Maybe you attended an event, maybe you signed up elsewhere, but now I know who you are and I'm beginning to consider and know more about yourself. Then nurture. So this is when you're helping the user feel confident about committing time or energy with your brand and typically nurturing them towards a transaction. And then that final one, reactivation. So this is where you're keeping your users engaged after that transaction and building a affinity and loyalty towards your brands. And then this is where we now get to those granular key moments that you can align to technology and your day-to-day roles, where you can now start to view those key milestones in which you might want to engage with that customer. So on top of that activation, those key moments, and these are just some kind of out of the box ones for this B2B and B2C example, but I'm sure all of you can kind of think towards your own brands and your own businesses, what's relevant for you. But here, capturing that email, for some, it's a really easy task. For others, it's something else. Being able to convert that person from unknown to known, getting them, particularly in this age of privacy, to be like, hey, business X, I want to give you my details. Maybe I want to create a login because I want to access something. Downloading an app, I'll come into a bit more detail there shortly. App sessions, profile completions, and then from a nurture perspective, so maybe when they viewed an item, maybe the frequency of those sessions, so they've opened your app, and now you can start to see how many times they're using the app, adding to basket, almost there in terms of that purchase. So this is where you might fire an abandoned basket campaign in that final section there, or a reorder or subscribe campaign where you're effectively trying to get them to either make that purchase and further interact with your brand. And then you take those moments, and this is very much where I put on my solutions consultant hat, and then this is where you start to think, okay, we've mapped out these moments. How can we now affect this to the campaigns that we plan to run with whatever platform or multiple platforms? So with the email capture, of course, then you might send them a timely email. With an app download, sending them a push notification. And then throughout this journey, the main point from a marketer's perspective is being able to identify those key moments that align with your business goals, and then bringing it down to a granular level. So everything that you're doing, from when you're adding a node to a workflow journey, or putting in a delay, or making some type of conditional statement within the templates that you're sending, all of that should revert back to that ultimate business goal. And you can get from that kind of high level to that most granular by using a process like this. So this is an example with Fender, who are a customer of ours, and this is an actual mapping workshop that they did, not with myself, but with one of my colleagues. And here they're building out their lifecycle campaign, and they've whiteboarded it, of course, in real life here, but we'd always recommend asking the wider team, and potentially even some customers, a few of the following sample questions whenever you're trying to start this user journey mapping process. The first, I've alluded to it kind of throughout this presentation, but what is that value proposition? It's always good. Some people call it a North Star. That's what they said in the previous session. It might sound a bit cliche or corny, but it is always worth reverting to that North Star, your value proposition. What are the values that you're trying to push through and communicate through every single channel that you have? Where are your milestone events? So went through that on the previous slide. Where are your drop-offs? This is key, and you'll see that with the case study at the end of this presentation, but identifying where those drop-offs are happening and then figuring out how you can do something about it. Which areas are underdeserved or underperforming? So again, similar to drop-offs, you're now looking from a reporting perspective, what is behaving well and what isn't? And then where are your campaigns focused? And then how do your campaigns keep the journey going? So at the end of this presentation, there's kind of a takeaway list, but if you are kind of having trouble, for the few hands that I did see who haven't started that customer journey mapping process yet, then these questions can help to that. Also, I know we're kind of focused in this example of doing it on a whiteboard and so on, but during the pandemic, Miro, I think Lucidchart is another really good one. Kind of be flexible to the needs of your team, but making sure that whether it's kind of remote or in person, that you're all kind of collaborating and getting the right people in the room. So data, which is the thing that gets me excited. Again, I won't dive too much into detail here, but I think the main takeaway is sticking to that journey that you saw in the previous examples from a data perspective. Every single touch point is an opportunity to learn more about who your customers are. Of course, it's also an opportunity for where they might drop off. But the converse to that is seeing each of these touch points and milestones as real opportunities to confirm and reaffirm their affinity towards your brand, and moving that kind of through the messages that you send. On the right, we have the premise of what we'll be talking about in the next few slides, but ultimately data is the driver of that cross-channel journey, and as we acquire it, we need to feed it back into the mix. Personalization, this is something that, of course, comes up in my day-to-day role, but it's a lot more than just content and what you're showing people. It's also segmentation, so what audiences are you putting people in? The touch points that you're deciding to engage with them. If Mike, who I'm picking out here, my colleague, if he prefers to be communicated on mobile push, whilst I'm email, it's recognizing that there are differences in the behaviors and the preferences of your customers. And if you can leverage that in terms of your own personalization strategy, then you can see really, really good results. I'll now kind of bring it to life, or hopefully bring it to life with an example. This is for a made-up company, so I don't get sued, but here we'll walk through those steps, but see what it might look like for a company. So the main thing before I kind of delve in is understanding that at each opportunity from a marketer's perspective as well, again, particularly in the world of privacy kind of conscious customers, it's understanding that at each point it's a give and a get. And by that I mean when you're asking customers to enable push notifications or to give me your email or fill out this quiz that tells me all of your preferences, then it's always, at least in my opinion, to be transparent as to your intention. So you're doing that so you can give them a personalized experience that will hopefully entice them and make them satisfied. So by that I mean Strava is a good example. With them, I always kind of enable the notifications because I want to know about maybe a 10K that I can get involved in near mine, or if there are friends and so on that from a kind of transactional perspective are performing certain activities. Those are things that I want to be notified about. Perhaps for another unnamed business, I wouldn't want to be, and instead I just want to receive those kind of critical emails that are telling me what's on offer. But in this example, that first step of the customer journey is whereby it might look something like this, whereby you have a web form in which you're asking them to give them your email. For some customers, this is kind of a no-brainer. Perhaps you're a deals website and you need them to log in to see the deals, and that's fine. But from my kind of own anecdotal experience, there are a lot of customers who are dealing with both anonymous and known users. So it's finding interactive ways in which you can get them to give up personalized information so you can really drive the experience for them. But maybe they've selected their email preferences, and then maybe they're met with a prompt to download their app. The next stage looks something like this. So let's say that your user clicked the app download call to action in your welcome email, and they've now downloaded your app from the App Store. How can you build around that experience? Well, as soon as the user logs in and it engages on that first app session, you're able to get a closer look at the type of device, maybe where they're based, how frequently they're using the app. And then at this point, you could trigger them into a cross-channel journey, encouraging them to discover different sections of the app. I think just remember that you're capturing this information and data so that you can better serve your customers further down the line. And then next is getting them to actually opt in. So similar to getting them to give their email, this is very much an art, one which I don't have the answer to, as to when do you ask somebody to enable, in this case, mobile push notifications. Is it after a delightful experience? Is it after they've made a purchase? Is it right at the beginning of the app? It will be different for each of your different businesses, but understanding when you do that is key, because once they're then enabled for this additional channel, then you have that channel to serve them further communications. And then lastly, we've reached the transactional stage. So this is a huge milestone to reach, as I alluded to in the previous one. And again, think back to the data that you've acquired, applied and transacted. Now you can pay it forward and really enrich through through the messages that you send your customers. So that was kind of a case, or not a case study, but a blanket example of how you might use that customer journey with a made up customer. Question that I have here was, how many of you are sending marketing emails? I'm putting up my hand to say, if you are, please put up your hand. Okay, email and push notifications, keep your hand up. Email, push, and in-app. Email, push, in-app, and SMS. I've lost, oh, wait, I still see a hand. And then email, push, in-app, SMS, and direct mail. No, okay, fine. Yeah, so the point there really is, and not every channel is for everybody. Email is, for want of a better term, king of the channels at the moment, and very much the one that most marketers kind of fall back to. But of course, mobile push and in-app, even mobile inbox, using in-app messages throughout the web as well. The main thing is understanding what and which channels kind of resonate most with your customers, and then engaging them throughout it. So the customer story I mentioned at the start is for our customer Calm. Anyone here use Calm? I definitely do. Yep, see a few hands again. So for those that don't, Calm is a mindfulness and meditation app whereby you can download and use different, well, I guess it's different meditations. I actually use it for when I'm trying to get to sleep, and it has different stories and so on. But ultimately, the main goal is for kind of bettering yourself and finding ways to chill out in this kind of hectic world that we live in. And Calm is very much app focused, and a lot of you would have seen this diagram on the right, whereby effectively it's showing us you as marketers spend so much time and money in acquiring a user and getting them to use and download and use your app. But that drop off is often significant, whereby they use their app for the first few days and then it falls off. And this was something that Calm were experiencing as well. Their own goals were to be as efficient as possible from an onboarding perspective, gain that new user affinity, and then of course that app stickiness, so getting them to use the app over and over. This is an example of what their journey looks like before the changes that they made. So let's say somebody completes a session, you send them an email congratulating them. Key here in the orange is that they're now held at this node for 2 days, and then you wait to see if they've completed another session. But what they found is that users dropped off not after a few days, but after a few hours, sometimes even minutes. And when they went to look at the key drop-off area, one of the things I mentioned to do in the previous slides, this is where they found most of their drop-off occurred. So they used our analytical capabilities to identify that, and then they took that and decided to update their journey. So beforehand, in that previous example that I showed you, 8 emails within that 27-day period with those 2-day delays that I showed. After, it's still the same amount of emails, but they reduced the amount of days in which those emails were sent, and the delays were switched from days to hourly. And it was from this change, which was of course over time, it wasn't instant, but this being able to nurture their onboarding journey through our platform, but then also using others as well, speaking transparently, they were able to 4x their revenue from email opens, so purchases and subscriptions as well. This slide is just to reinforce and show the fact that it was a cross-channel campaign. I know I only had email in that previous example, but these are some of the different channels in which they engage with their customers. So an email on the left, that nudge, I've forgotten what it's called, where they ask for your permission to actually enable push. and then what a push notification could look like. But this was the main takeaway from Sue Cho, who was the head of lifecycle marketing at Calm. And she said, when thinking of how to optimize campaigns, my answer is always, it depends. I ought to look at the data. Iterable allows me to take insights across technologies and apply informed changes that drive the most important metric, which is revenue. So wrapping it all up, and appreciate you for staying with me throughout this, but if you were going to kind of only take away a few things, these would be what would leave you with. So number one, mapping out the actual journey sounds like a given, but honestly, being able to do that either using Miro or in person, having it mapped out with your various teams, learning from that journey, so continually iterating and looking at its effectiveness, feeling the experience, again, sounds a bit cliche, but from that, it's using empathy to take it from the perspective of the customer and experience what they're experiencing, build responsively, not responsibly. So with that, we're simply saying always kind of look at the results of what you're sending out, how it's performing, and then respond on that. Don't just kind of sit and wait. A/B experiment, use reporting capabilities, push it out to external tools as well. Then understanding the value of each channel. So being able to see from a monetary perspective how effective each channel is, but then also the engagement with those different channels. And then being data-driven, derived and data discerned. With this, even though data is key, particularly for me, from a more technical background, what I will say, something that a lot of marketers that we speak to kind of raise, even though data is key and you want to look at reporting, you want to see engagement, you want to make sure that you have access to the data for personalization and so on, it's still ultimately a human art. And by that, I mean, there is a level of adding subjective kind of human sympathy to what you're doing. So not just relying wholly and entirely on the data, but making sure that you have a good mix of the two. Any questions? Yes.
Thanks very much.
No worries.
So I'd be curious, like, do you have any thoughts or on the reasoning, like why having this onboarding journey had such a dramatic effect?
Yeah, so I think from Calm's perspective, when this was done, it was being able to see kind of at this stage that there was a considerable amount of drop-off. I know you were in the previous Amplitude session, so not too dissimilar to the example that was shown there, whereby they were able to identify that this, even though it kind of seems quite simple, but being able to engage that user and see, okay, not wait 2 days to send an email, but send a follow-up push notification to say, hey, Philip, how was your meditation session? Oh, okay, I now leave a review. I'm now a bit more engaged. And then now kind of Calm is in the back of my mind. That's my hypothesis, mainly that being able to kind of identify that leaving such a big wait period is where you lose drop off. And when you close that app for a day or two, this from my own anecdotal experience, you're probably not going to open it again. Whilst if you can encourage them to do so, then they're very much more likely to be sticky with that app. I think that's it, unless there was any more questions. No, perfect. Well, yeah, thank you everyone for having a listen. Yeah, cheers.